So in this video, we're taking a look at build number 5 out of 6 of my Brickonicle G3 series, whatever you want to call it. I'm really happy with this one. This is the Deep Jungle, and this is one that has been teased in a previous video. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. And of course, if you like this type of content, make sure you're subscribed. It really does help out the channel. So this is mock number 5, and you'll see right off the bat 919-ish pieces, but that's actually not everything that you see here because there are actually 2 pods off of the screen right now, which we'll take a look at in a moment. The set here is a more medium scale, medium sized set overall. And just like all of the others, functions as a sort of diorama, but also as a board game as well. I will say, for all intents and purposes, this is probably the weakest looking diorama to me, but that is just because I have to make sure that it's open enough for you to get your hands underneath there, for you to be able to move characters around. And although it is a jungle, it's sort of a jungle edge, if you will. So you've got this sort of grassland off to one side just to kind of open things up a bit. And of course, it just means less pieces used overall. More pieces that can focus on the set here. This is a set that personally I would like to see LEGO make around the $50 to $60 price point. Maybe that's asking a little bit too much for something like this, but you'll note that with this build and with many of the other builds that I have done, many of the pieces that show up here are unique in terms of their color. So for example, this piece that you see right here only appears in this case, 2 colors, but most other pieces, if it shows up in the set, it only appears in 1 color, occasionally 2. And that helps to just bring down the manufacturing costs for sets like this, because yes, I'm really putting way too much thought into this as it stands. Of course, the build itself focuses on these 2 major trees and a handful of functions as well, but you do have a more minor tree over here and even a tree stump where the golden mask is hidden. If you don't know the sort of task, what you're trying to do in this game is to collect that golden mask and bring it back to the start, which does require a couple of things to take place, but suffice to say, it's a really interesting game, and I do plan to do a test of the game. Maybe even a live gameplay test would be a lot of fun, though granted, that's going to be later when I've got just a better camera in general and a better setup, because it's something I would like to do with friends. With that, you also have 4 characters here. Of course, you have Liwa and Matao, as you would expect. 2 other characters that are, though unnamed here, I would expect LEGO to name these characters so that you get a little bit of familiarity with them. This is definitely a nod to Orcom here with the dark green mask, and you have a nod to the Terracotta with the teal mask here as well. But the set does not just come with these 4 masks. Again, you have that golden mask hidden within the tree, and you even have the trans dark blue Rao here, another nod to a prototype, in this case on the Rahi. So as all of the other sets have, this build focuses part of its building event, whatever you want to call that, on this Technic based Rahi. I want to mention that all of the pieces for all of the Rahi that I have designed currently exist in LEGO as well, so they require no non-existent or retired pieces, with the exception, of course, of one piece, the magic piece, as I talked about in a previous video, which is one that I designed. It is a decorative piece, it's a flower piece, whatever you want to call it, but it also works as a gear. That's in its own video as well, which you can check out on the channel. But this set does have a function on the Mosquito Carini build itself, that is the name, where you can press down on this actuator back here to flap the wings. Essentially, it moves these ball joints, these linkages, and that actually moves the wings forward and back. It's a really fun function. I had a lot of fun designing and playtesting this build here. Of course, it has mini masks, which I didn't use, but I have based all of my Rahi, or most of my Rahi in this series, on Rahi that I've designed in the past. Along with that, there are a handful of functions in the set itself, and we'll take a look at the pods here in a moment. But first things first, by turning this little lever, actuator, knob, whatever here, that will actually rotate the entire top of this tree. This gear is actually locked onto the gear directly below it, so it will not move, but it allows you to kind of angle whatever is attached to this. And in this case, this is a mount for that Carini mosquito, whatever you want to call it, that Rahi here. The idea is that you can actually rotate this upper section of the tree, and it will actually fly over top the bridge, over top this action tile, and you can use it to knock characters off, send them back to a different spot somewhere else in the game, which I think is pretty cool overall. On top of that, the set also has an elevator function controlled by this green gear up at the top here, where just by twisting this, you're going to raise and lower the elevator, allowing characters to get back here to get this key. You also have the expansion tile back here and the expansion lift arms here, so you can connect other sets to it as well to expand gameplay. That's not required by any means. All of these are designed to be played independently from each other, but expansions just add more gameplay overall. And something I'll talk about in other videos as well, or in a dedicated video, will be that gameplay both in its quick form and in its long form. You can see that all the games also include these tokens, which is something I'll talk about in that video, so stay tuned for that one. But one of the more fun things to see about these, one of the things that I think is a lot of fun and sort of incentivizes people to buy, because I understand, and hopefully Lego would understand too, that there's a lot of people that are going to want these characters but can't go out and shell out, $100 for the Avalanche Mountain to get Kopaka, which means some of those characters are going to be more expensive, and that's unfortunate. But if you want characters that are established in the story, like, say, Kopiki or Motoro, well, that's what the pods are for. Those pods are roughly $7-ish price point sets, and they are designed to essentially act as these sort of character packs for characters that we are familiar with. In this case here, you have Tamaru, you have, not Tamaru, sorry, this is Tamaru, this is Kangu, got them swapped around. With, of course, these pods, each of the villages, each of the elements has 2, which means that you get 12 Matora in total. And for each of these elements, one of the 2 pods is a landscape-based set. In this case here, you have this small tree build with, of course, a musical area in front of it as a nod to the Mononui online game. And, of course, you get the silver Miru here, as well as, of course, the Miru on Kangu himself. And then the other function in these sets, or the other pod rather, is the Rahi focus pod. In this case, you have the bow snake, if I remember correctly, and this is a fun one as well, though I would definitely redesign the jaw here because that's a finicky piece to mess around with. And of course, this does not currently have a mask on it yet, which it should. All of the Rahi hopefully would have masks of some kind. So that way each of these sets would also come with 2 of these minifigure mask helmets. This has a very simple function or feature where it is just basically a slinky snake. It's nothing terribly fancy, but the snake can, slither. It can scoot across the ground. You can do what you would expect. And I think it's intuitive enough to understand looking at it. So definitely a fun design, one that I had a lot of fun creating. And it's actually one of the earliest Rahi that I've ever designed, just generally speaking. I think I designed it all the way back in like 2018, 17, somewhere in there, and posted it on Discord as my second Rahi ever. All things told, with the pods, with the sets that you see on screen, 918 pieces roughly. Someone did mention, though, that if Lego was going to make these, it's very likely that they would do so by kind of trimming the fat, and I completely agree. There are some people who also suggest that this either would or would not succeed for various reasons, and to address that quite simply, we can't know. We don't know the market for these things. I have enjoyed Lego games in the past, board games specifically, but I will definitely be honest and say that many of them have been kind of lackluster, at least as an adult trying to play those games. But at the end of the day, these are Bionicle sort of fan projects. They are essentially here to be a nod to nostalgia, to be reasonably inexpensive to produce. Yes, it's still plastic. Yes, these are still Lego pieces. There is obviously cost there, but many of the pieces exist, many of the colors exist, or if they don't, are repetitive to keep costs down as well. But I will absolutely say, no doubt, that these can be trimmed. The parts counts could absolutely be cut down. The sets could be designed better by more experienced Lego designers, because I am not one of those. I'm not a Lego designer, and I'm not someone who does like a tremendous job when it comes to designing system sets specifically. There are people who are far more talented than me and who would be able to understand kind of what I'm going for a game like this, that would be able to just condense it further. Because at the end of the day, these are games that are designed to be played if you want to quickly, but if you want a longer game that maybe takes an hour or more, you have that as an option. If you want it to be an event, or even something where you play it one night, leave it on the table, go to sleep, come back the next day and do it again, that kind of stuff. I've had good memories in both directions with fast games and with long form games. On top of all of that, though, these sets need to function as attractive builds. And that's why I said this was probably one of the weaker diorama sets that I've designed, because it's a jungle. It's very green overall. And as cool as that might be, it can be hard to design that stuff without it looking too complicated, being too fragile, or just looking too bland because of a lot of similarities in color, which is partially why you saw these sort of like rocky structures here, just to kind of break things up, add a little bit of gray, add a little bit of other colors outside of just, lush green leaves everywhere. It's also why you see flowers on occasion in the set. So a lot of little things that I want to think about when designing sets like this, but at the end of the day, I am by no means perfect, and surely somebody could do a better job. A team of people could do a better job, but that's why I like this project. And lastly, as I mentioned in that video talking about how I think this works as the most risk-free version of Bionicle that LEGO could make, all I mean by that is that it's not that every fan wants this. There are many people, in fact, I would say a large chunk of the fan base of Bionicle, who believe that Bionicle needs to be mechanical, needs to be Technic. There's a robot essence, and having these minifigures alienates that. And while I can see that argument, the point of this is not to be a replacement for Bionicle, not to be a one-up on it either, but it's sort of a celebration of Bionicle for what it once was. Obviously, as I mentioned, I picked Generation 1 here, not because it's new, it's clearly not, but because it's reasonably approachable for everybody, especially the earliest years of Generation 1. Bionicle's story absolutely gets complex as time goes on, especially after like 2004. So at the moment, I've just decided I'm not going to worry about that. These sets are specifically tailored to some aspect of 2001 or thereabout. Changing the story a little, sure, if you want to, but that's not what's important here. The thing that I think is important about these is that they're accessible, that they're at least reasonably affordable, and you would hope that there would be ways to get the Toa or the Turaga figures outside of these sets as well, so you don't have to go out and shell out $200 to get the full team, because there are going to be some people who would want this specifically for those minifigures, especially if, sure, they're just minifigure builds, but if the masks are good, if the weapons are good, I think that people would still be happy for its existence, even if it got canceled in its second year or third year, whatever. That's the point, right? It's a celebration of what Bionicle was. It's not an answer to what the community wants. And I think at its core, it's the safest kind of celebration. Because like I mentioned in those videos, SCCBS is cool, it's fun, and it has a lot of potential. But it can wear itself very thin. And there are a lot of people already complaining about the amount of mechs that LEGO has going on right now, not to mention the themes that LEGO has currently. And so if you dedicated an entire theme like Bionicle to SCCBS figures, would it work? Sure. Some people would absolutely buy, but I basically guarantee it would still have poor sales. Not because people don't like it, but because SCCBS figures are typically going to be between the $10 to $20 range, and in order to make these Bionicles something that capture their original essence, you're either going to have a lot of repeat builds, which means, sure, $10 a piece, that's a good price, but do you want to spend $60 for the full set if all 6 are going to be very similar builds? But on the opposite of that, if you do make them overly unique from each other or try to give them different character, you're going to make some fans upset because of the alienation of what portrayal of the character they are. Or some of the sets, again, will be more expensive than others because of the nature of the parts involved, right? Because of a higher parts count, whatever the case, right? So there's all kinds of obstacles to overcome here. And I don't think that there's any one answer to what Bionicle is going forward, outside of course, the fan base keeping it alive. Here's the thing. I would love to see more SCCBS sets in the future and more support for those sets as well. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. With the SCCBS Tahu, for example, there are very few new pieces in that set. There are the 2 printed masks, and maybe that's it. And so, on top of the sets being repetitive, you'd basically be shelling out money for 1 or 2 exclusive pieces here or there. And that can also be a bit of a hard pill to swallow, especially when you're trying to attract new kids to buy in, especially when they have options like Ninjago that are established, that have other things outside of just, robot SCCBS type builds. I think, for what it's worth, that SCCBS Bionicle can work as a complement to other themes, and I've sort of thought about making a video separate about this concept, and maybe I will. But at the end of the day, I think that board game Bionicle, for what it's worth, is fun to design. Hopefully, you would have to hope it at least be fun to play, fun to expand upon, and still a good nod to Bionicle and recognition of it. And in this case here, you're getting actual mask molds at the very least, right? Rather than printed pieces. It's not to say that those don't have value, but again, if we can see, custom stickers pop up as little Easter eggs in other themes, and maybe every couple of years get an SCCBS dedicated Bionicle figure, I think that's enough for now, at least. A lot of people would love Bionicle to come back as its own system or as Technic or whatever. And I think this is a good balance without introducing too much expense. Because the last thing I want to mention before I end this video is that Bionicle, especially in its latest days back in 2009, 2010, etc., required a lot of new molds every single year, more than most other themes, and that's very expensive, right? So that's the other nice thing about a theme like this, is that although the Bionicle masks likely wouldn't show up in other themes, not to say you couldn't have a Halloween themed city set that has a character wearing it as a nod, sure, but some of the weapons could maybe show up in other fantasy themes, for example, or in Ninjago or in Monkey Kid, whatever. And of course, the custom, Lego pieces that I designed like this one could easily show up in other themes as well. In fact, all of the system pieces I designed are designed for that universal feel. Anyway, I dragged this video on way longer than I intended, so hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully that's as concise a thought I can give to you guys. That's really all I have. It's not a flawless idea, I know that. And again, I'm just one person, so there's no way that out of the box I'm going to design something perfect. That's not how that works. But it is fun, at the very least. And whether or not it's something you look at that you enjoy the idea of, or you look at and go, Legos upset me in the past, they're going to do it again, so let's just not have Bionicle come back. Whatever way you look at it, even if you look at it as Bionicle not being real Lego, as some Lego builders think that way, and that's fine. I disagree, but that's fine. This is, I think, something that the widest range of audience can enjoy, and worst case scenario, some people are going to sleep on it. Some people won't buy it. But if someone's got an extra 20 or 30 bucks burning a hole in their pocket, maybe they weren't looking at getting a Bionicle set, but they're like, why would I miss it? This one has my favorite Toa Pohatu or whatever. I'll buy it, whatever. And maybe they enjoy it. You have somebody new to buy, somebody old to buy, or maybe they just rethink their thoughts on Bionicle as a system and not just as a story based on robots. All right, so 20 minutes exactly. That was kind of weird. All right. So if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe because it tells YouTube you want to see more content like this. And of course, it helps the channel grow as well. On top of that, you can also check out the conversation in the comments or in the description. You can check out Discord, Instagram, or Patreon if you want to support the channel and get some perks. And I will see you all tomorrow, I guess. Take care.